So, hi everybody, this is Mridul, a very strong willed and determined person. Mridul, when you were 3, you realized you were not very comfortable in a boy's body. What was it that made you notice that?
I think it was a sense of discomfort and a incongruence in how people saw me and how I felt. So obviously, as a 43-year-old adult, I can describe this really clearly, but as a 3-year-old, I could not. I just knew that there was discomfort, and I knew that I was seeing the world as a girl, and I didn't fully understand why no one else could see it in that way. I suppose they recognized that I was a very feminine young child.
As a 3-year-old, of course, you could not express yourself, but later, there must have been a time when you had to tell your family about this. Was
Yes.
it easy?
So I would say that I tried throughout my childhood in whatever way that it was possible as a child to explain to people, to let people know that I was a girl. I wanted to be treated as one. But I think like a serious conversation about transitioning or being a trans woman, that really happened in a serious way. When I was about 17 years old, I was very suicidal and I couldn't cope with life anymore. So I wrote a letter to my mother, actually both my parents, but my mother read it. I have to say that my mother, although she didn't speak to me directly, she got my grandmother and her sister to go and see some doctors who then spoke to me. Like I remember meeting a psychiatrist and an endocrinologist and a pediatrician. But all of them were like, oh no, you know, Mridul will grow out of it. Because actually, the reality is that most medical professionals all over the world, not just in India, they don't receive any training, any discussion on trans people's lives. So, in some ways, my parents were supportive, but to a point. They took the word of a doctor over mine, but they wanted to see if I had chromosomal or genitalia characteristics that were not just male. But that's not who a trans person is. A trans person is somebody who whose whose view of life, whose experience of life, how they feel in themselves is very different to the sex that they were assigned at birth.
You finally were able to convince your parents, and they finally accepted you at some point of time.
Yes.
When you underwent that sex change, they were there with you, right? How did you think of undergoing this operation? Because it is not easy physically, I know that. Was it very tough for you physically and emotionally?
So there's a whole thing in between being 17 and 22 when I had my surgery. So my parents were not automatic supporters of my cause. So they spent a lot of time trying to ignore or actively deny or stop me from transitioning, but they just felt that it was not something I should do for whatever reason. Some of it was about the dangers of having a surgery. Some of it was about their social standing in society. But what I believed for myself was that I did not want to live my life on the terms that other people had decided for me, because um, there is no point in living a life that is primarily for the sake of others. So even at that age, when I was about 18, I decided that I will not hide. I will not tell people who I am. So if people questioned why I spoke or thought or behaved in a certain way, I I would say that I'm a woman, and you may not see it and you may not want to see it, but that is who I am. Take it or leave it. And with that, I built my confidence in knowing that I didn't need the approval of other people, be it my parents, be it my colleagues, be it my friends, to live life on my terms. Because actually, the moment I decided to be honest about myself and transparent about who I am, my relationships changed. By the time I was able to find the doctors, like one of the difficulties in 1999, 2000 was to find doctors who would help me transition in Pune, where I grew up or where I lived. And so that took longer than actually making the decision. So by the time I found the doctors and I was able to transition, with have the surgery, take hormones, it was very clear to my parents that I did not need them to transition. It was going to happen whether they wanted it or not. So when you take power away from those who choose to control your life, then they have to choose if they want to be in your life or not. So when I took the power away from my parents to control my life, they made a choice to be supportive. Um, and it was on my terms. And we have a really good relationship, but I did not need their support. I got it and I value it. So emotionally, it was hard to make the decision of taking of loosening myself from the control of the people I loved. But once I made that decision, it was very liberating.
Initially, probably it was support by force. Now they've accepted you.
In fact, I remember the day before my surgery, which was, like it's quite a big surgery. But it's not that complex. But I remember like a couple of days before it, like my grandmother, her sister, and other older women in my family, and in my grandmother's friend circle. I was living with her, and my dad came there, and he said that he had informed his entire family that this was happening, and what did he need to do? So they made that choice to love their child no matter what. I think it is a rare gift, unconditional love. Not all of us get it, but if we get it, we should really celebrate it. And I would say that they're very proud and unashamed of who I am. And I hope that other trans people or parents of other trans children who may be watching this can give the same to their children.
Like you said, from 17 to 22, there was a long gap.
Mhm.
It must have been quite traumatic for you, Mridul. Your family was supportive. What about the society?
Yeah, so I would say not just between the ages of 17 to 22. I think it became easier between those ages because I surrounded myself with good people, but I cannot remember a single day in my childhood where I did not experience some form of violence, from sexual violence to emotional abuse, name calling, to physical violence. All of that was a regular feature of my life. And I think what is unique about my experience as a trans woman, and I think for a lot of trans people, whether in India or anywhere else in the world, was that there is no safe space for you. So from the moment people see you as not male or not female, because trans men exist, you become particularly a target for violence. And in my case, women didn't see me before I transitioned as a woman. Like what I experienced, a lot of women in India experience sexual violence on the streets, harassment, sexual violence in the home, in friendships, and so on. But at, but you have, in some ways, positively or negatively, a community of women who you can be part of, who you can seek safety from, whether it is in the women's toilet or whether it's in the women's section of the bus, or if you're in Mumbai, like on the local train for ladies. Like that was not an option for me. I had to go into spaces which were dominated by men, and so there was a lot of unsafe violence. And some of my responses in my early childhood was to just not deal with the world. So my world was very small.
So you mentioned that you went to a boys' Catholic school. That must have been terrible for you.
Yeah, I had many negative experiences, but I also had some friends. And, as you hit puberty and people become more aware of sort of sex and gender differences, that's when it became harder in school. But I had my escapes in school. Like I was always performing on stage. It was that's where I could be dressed up as a girl. Because they always needed one in a boys' school. So it would be me. Sometimes I would be dancing, or I was the school's. Like I played in the school's badminton team. So I did have many positive experiences, and I don't like to see my early life is black and white, but you're right. It was not great. There was a sexual abuser in my school. At least he was what we call a brother in the school.
Can you tell us something about what you are doing?
I live in Scotland just now, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre. So the Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre works with women and girls and trans people over the age of 12 who've experienced sexual violence at any point in their lives. So my colleagues and I, we're about 40 of us, we support anyone uh, from that group who have experienced sexual violence. So essentially just supporting, helping women to make sense of what happened to them, whether it was rape or incest or childhood sexual abuse or harassment on the street, helping them to recover from that is what I do.
A lot of women here in India are abused, not just verbally, but also physically.
Yeah.
But they have no one to go to.
It's important to say that domestic abuse and gender-based violence is a universal problem. It's a global problem. But who is doing it and who is perpetrating it are almost entirely men. And they use similar tactics the world over. I guess it is true to a point that there is no help, or there is little help in India for women who experience domestic abuse and sexual violence. I think there is a lot of focus in India as for economic empowerment. So if you give a woman a job and you give her money and an education, then she won't experience these forms of violence. But that is not true. In India and actually all over the world, we like to tell the story of the stranger who's going to hurt you. So we protect our daughters and our girls and our young children from the stranger. But who is protecting them from the dangerous person in the house? Who is doing that, protecting them from the people in school who are harmful? But when the person who's abusing you is someone you know, they often know you really well because you have told them your weaknesses and your strengths. And then they use that against you to control you. So you can't just leave because you have a job. You can't just leave because you're educated. It can be just as hard whether you have money or no money. It is just as hard whether you have education or no education. It is possible, but it is harder when you don't have a support network. Because what is really important to end abusive relationships is a support network. But the moment you have children, the moment you are a dark-skinned woman in India, the moment you're not an upper caste woman in India, or you have little money, the harder it becomes to end these relationships. And while I'm saying India, it is true even in Scotland.
In India, it's harder because even your family doesn't support you. If you're married and you want to get back to your parents,
Yeah.
they will tell you, no, you stick to your husband, don't come back to us.
Yes.
Because the society doesn't accept it.
Yeah, we see that even here in Scotland. I would say like the difference here in Scotland is that organizations like mine exist. We are funded by our government. So the solution is not to rely on men and the systems that men have created. A simple solution is come together and fund one woman to leave, help her find her home. Despite what I'm saying, women are leaving abusive relationships in India. My mother-in-law left an abusive relationship after 50 years. So it is absolutely possible, and it is happening. I think what should happen more of is organizing together as groups of women to help women who need our help, because we never know when it's our turn.
We have a long way to go
Yeah.
in India,
Mhm.
especially. Now we have Palak saying, don't you feel women are much more stronger now? And if she wants to, she can very well walk out. Yes, that's what Mridul
Yeah,
mentioned.
to see which women, who is able to leave. So if we look at who it is, then it is women who have some support or who have nothing to lose or who really, despite, who really love themselves, I would say. Sometimes it's because they have no choice. They've been thrown out of the house. And so, there are so many reasons why women leave, but they should not have to go through struggles when they leave. She shouldn't have to justify herself all the time about why she left.
Mridul, indeed an inspirational journey. Let's listen to the happy parts of Mridul's life now. Mridul has a family. She's happily married. She has two wonderful boys. So, how did you meet your husband?
I met my husband on Match.com. I know people are more comfortable using Tinder now, but in 2004, no, not, it wasn't 2004. That's crazy. I was already married. It was 2002, actually.
So you've forgotten when you met him?
So in 2002, we met on Match.com. He lived in Hyderabad at the time, and I lived in Pune, and we met, and then that was it. We were married 6 months later, and what, it's now how many ever years? 18 years that we are married. And I have two sons who I adopted. My children know I'm trans. Obviously, my husband knew I was trans. Everybody knows I'm trans. There is no secret there, and no shame at all. And it is possible to have a happy life. But I know that at the moment, only some trans people have this experience, and more trans people don't have the opportunity to live their fullest lives. So, my question to you is like, what are you going to do about it in your own little space in the world? How are you going to make the lives of people who are different from you or who are struggling or recovering from trauma better? Um, I have a happy and good and successful life, but there is only one of me. I am the only trans woman, immigrant woman, Indian woman who manages a rape crisis center in Scotland. Um, and it should not be like that. I should not be the inspiration or the exception. I should just be the normal.
Come to think about it, yes. Change, it comes with generations. So now maybe, that's what we can teach our children so that the next generation is more aware and accepts, the other gender as well.
Yeah.
Your husband definitely gave you unconditional love. What about your in-laws?
My husband didn't have a very good relationship with them. I only used to see them once a year because he lived really far away. And so in some ways it didn't matter whether they knew me or not. I mean, they know about me now. But in the early years, like it was not an issue. Although my mother-in-law expected me to have a baby, which of course was not going to happen. but she also knew that her son had my husband wanted to adopt a child for a really, really long time. My mother-in-law lives with me now.
So there were no expectations as such in particular, except for you bearing a child from them.
Yeah, but that also was like one sentence, once a conversation, and I was like, it's none of your business, and that was it, finished.
Have you ever been questioned about your womanhood, Mridul?
All the time, people question.
Still?
Even now, people question my womanhood. But womanhood is different for everybody. Like even amongst the 5 or 6 women who are live with us just now, um, all of us have a different womanhood. My womanhood is different to somebody who was born, who we would call cisgendered, and that's a term to describe women who were assigned girl at birth, who were born with the female genitalia, and their lives were very different to mine. Um, I would say that the girls in my family had a lot more restrictions than I did. Like their lives were more controlled than mine was. But there are other women who had much more free lives than I did. So everybody's womanhood is different. Yeah, people question it. At the moment in Scotland, there is a real, what we would call transphobia, it's rising. It's very dangerous. I have been the target of it. I've had to involve the police a number of times over the last 3 years.
Why is that? What is it that
So
you're talking about?
it's what we would call transphobia. So there are a group of people who believe that I am not a woman and I should not work in a job that is meant for women. Some of them would rather I don't exist. They have made life very difficult for me, and they've also made life very dangerous for me because we all are different women, and we all have a different relationship with our womanhood. So there'll be some women who might watch this and who would, totally not identify with my experience of womanhood or even your experience of womanhood, Sakshi. And that's okay.
But you were doing a great job. You're protecting women and giving them shelter, helping them. So it's a fantastic job you're doing. So we're all very, very proud of you. Because you have two boys, what is it that you would like to teach them?
Okay. I think consent, in first of all, like understanding what consent means, and fundamentally that you have to see everybody as people, as human, and you cannot see women in particular as somehow less than, or that women can only do some things, or for that matter that men can only do some things. So trying to teach them, and it's really hard because for every one message I give, there are 10 other messages from society undermining what I'm saying to my children about equality, and about women's role in society. And when I say about consent, it's for them to experience, and it's really hard, I have to say, to experience being parented with consent. And what that means is that I recognize, even though that they're 11 and 6 and 7, that they have their own autonomy as human beings, and that if I want something to happen for them, they should be in agreement, or they should be fully informed. I think those are important life lessons, because if people see you from your childhood as an autonomous, independent person, then you can live life and treat others as autonomous, independent people and respect their boundaries. It is very hard to do, and I definitely don't succeed at it all the time. The second thing about consent is, um, around, particularly as my older one is 11 and very interested in sexual things right now. So I have very open conversations with him about sex. But for him to know that consent is not permanent, particularly in the context of a romantic relationship. So that's what he will be learning as he grows older, because I think one of the big problems we see amongst men is that they think that they have free access to a woman's body whenever they like, especially if they are married to her. They are men in a man's world. They will also experience power.
I can see are bringing them up beautifully. Any message that you would like to give to people about transgender?
Yes. So trans people are people. Okay. And just because they are different to you, or their bodies look different to you, or they look that they have or that I say they, like we have different bodies or different voices, or or different ambitions, we deserve and we need the same rights, or in fact, we all need better rights in our society. I would like to know if you love your friends because of how they look or because of who they are. No, don't stereotype us. And also, like, acknowledge that we are inherently transphobic. So you to be not to be inclusive of people, uh, we have to acknowledge that we are already prejudiced. I'm just thinking of the conversation that we had, Sakshi, the other day, where you were saying like you didn't know anything about these issues. So in that sense, ignorance is a form of prejudice. So you did not actively harm me, but not knowing means that you grew up in a way that you didn't even have to think about us, and that is prejudice. Uh, And so you have to unlearn. I used you as an example, but this is like a general question, general answer for people.
Yeah. Okay, I can't hear you. Is it me or is it everybody else? We are facing a lot of technical issues today. We'll just kind of end the session here. Like Yamini Atri said, beautiful evening spent with a beautiful person. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us on Women Talk.